Well, I think it's not a bad time to be German right now, especially when you live in New York. Somehow, by a weird, ironical twist of history, Germany is seen by many people as the stalwart and the last, not the last actually, but a bastion of liberal democracy in the world. So suddenly people get kind of excited when you tell them you're German. So that's really a new thing. That has never happened before. And of course I like that, but I'm very much aware of the irony in that, of the historical irony in that. But also that means there's a lot more interest in German culture. And of course there's so much interest in Berlin now as a city. And it has become, among other things, quite an international city with a lot of people from all over the world moving there. So just on purely personal terms, I have to say it's a very good moment to be a German writer.
Do you think has been the recipe from starting being an outlaw in 1945
Yes.
to achieving this position today?
I think not closing your eyes about what happened. So of course it was all. I mean, it's a complicated story, and as we know, the first 10 years after the war, the Germans really didn't want to confront their past. But then slowly they actually did. A very important moment was the so-called Auschwitz trial that Fritz Bauer put into motion, who had actually been in exile in Denmark, put into motion in Frankfurt. But of all countries that recently, or actually maybe not even recently, of all countries that went through dictatorships, no other country has done as much as Germany to confront the question of what happened and who was guilty. And Germany did that another time after the fall of the GDR. There was the strong urge on part of many people to close the archives, the Stasi archives, the archives of the files about the crimes committed by the GDR spy services on their own population, and the population people and German, not GDR people spying on each other and things like that. But the archives weren't closed; they were opened and accessible for everyone. That was very painful, but that was very, very important. So of course there was. It's all very incomplete. It's all very unsatisfying because more should have been done. More should have been done after the Second World War. More should have been done after the fall of the GDR. So it's not a reason to just congratulate Germany and be happy. But it was still more than any other country ever did, and in a situation like that. And that, I think, is the main reason that Germany is today maybe only comparable with Sweden and maybe Denmark. I don't know that much about Denmark. Is one of has maybe the most open and liberal society you can find in the world. Again, it's not as if it all was done perfectly well in terms of confronting the past, but it was much more than nothing, and it could have been much worse.
You were born in 1975, so you could in a way say our past is not my kind of issue anymore. On the other hand, your father was in a concentration camp very shortly. In some reflection about fame, you once wrote that fame is nice, but you shouldn't take it too seriously. But still the ambition of the author with writing his books is to maybe not change, but influence things. How do you see the role of the writer in our contemporary society?
I don't think I said influence things. I think I said to reach people. So the idea would just to, as Thomas Bernhard said, ausstrahlen. I think that's a good way to put it. To just get people to notice what you're doing as an artist. So I don't necessarily think to influence them in any way.
But surely you mean more than selling books.
Yeah. I don't mean that. I mean something like moving them, So I guess I do mean influence in a way. I just didn't mean that in a narrow political way. But of course, I mean, you can also try to do it in a political way. I just finished, not just last year, I finished a play which will open in Vienna in a politically very difficult situation in Austria in a week from now, which is a play about refugees, about a not very well known historical episode where the Nazis allowed a ship full of Jewish refugees to leave the country, and then first Cuba and then the United States didn't want to accept those refugees because they felt like 1,000 people is just too much for the United States, which sounds absolutely ridiculous. But they argued the same way. You can see arguments go in the papers of today. The ship had to turn back and went back to Europe, and most of the people died in the war and in concentration camps. And so in a way, it was commissioned by the theater. It was not my idea to write that right now, but it was very convincing to me why it was important to write about that right now. So in a way, that is a play of mine about German history and also absolutely about the present situation. We wouldn't have chosen that subject if it were not for all those boats out there right now that, for example, Italy is not giving permission to land in their harbors, those boats with refugees. So in that case, I do hope to influence people, not in the narrow way of making a political argument, although I don't mind that at all either, more in the way of raising empathy. Because the question, when you have a ship full of people who are dying on that ship, when you have to decide whether you will allow that ship to land, to anchor or not, it's really not a political decision, it's a decision of empathy. And that's what it all comes down to in a moment like that.